Well, hello and welcome everyone. We'll just get started here. Sorry about the technical issues we've had. Hopefully it'll be solved soon. So welcome again. I hope you all had a wonderful lunch. Today I'm joined by Yuvaraj Mani, Chief Product Officer at Orchid, Cengizhan Yenerim, Head of Risk Development from Engie, Evan Omahani, VP Technology Services from CPS Energy, and Trinity Lloyd, Energy Transition and Sustainability Lead from Google Cloud, Google. Welcome and thank you for joining me today. Evan, I'd like to start with you. Could you tell us what AI readiness looks like? How do utilities set their expectations with AI, and what information do they need to have?
Sure. Great question, and one. Okay, cool. And I think one that we get quite frequently, or most organizations, contemplate when they start to embark on a journey that involves AI. I think for us at CPS Energy, there are three primary factors that we look at. The first is really understanding what problem we're trying to solve. Technologists by nature, I think, can come up with solutions all day long, but if they're not applicable in the organization and you can't tie that use case back to value that will be derived in the organization, it probably isn't something that you should be focused on or investing in, especially early on in the journey when you're trying to sell the organization around the value of moving to AI-based solutions. I think we'll talk later about some specific use cases, but for us, those were outcomes. Like, how can we reduce the days it takes for us to pay an accounts payable invoice? Or how can we better identify opportunities to focus our investment in vegetation management, right? So understanding those real business problems and how you can leverage AI to address them, I think, is foundational. The second is long-term supportability. Whether that's taking your existing technical teams and making sure that they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be able to support the solution, or you're leveraging a partner ecosystem to help fill those gaps for you, making sure that you have a strategy early on around how you will continue to
Excellent. Yeah, so I think we have some really diverse panelists here with really interesting perspectives.
Making sure that you have that support model in place to be able to continue to partner with the organization when technical issues come up and be able to build upon the initial use case that was deployed. The third and last thing that I'll say is understanding your data. AI is extremely dependent on the data that's coming in and understanding the expectations around what you're going to get out of it, and making sure that you have a foundation at least for governance and understanding of the information that you're going to put through these AI models will be critical to really ensure that you're getting a result that you can actually make tangible business decisions.
But that is just stored there for record keeping, right? But it was actually consuming and this is collected over a long period of time, so there's a wealth of information in that. And they had a question, so, is there a way to sort of reduce truck routes, right, for unnecessary costs that we can go through? How do we figure out what is unnecessary costs? That and all. So what we did is we went into the unstructured data and started analyzing that and figuring out from the sentiment of it whether it was a good call or a bad call, and started tagging every information with that. With that information, we were able to figure out which of the service orders were actually worthy calls and which of them were actually things that they could have avoided, and rather than spend time on more important work on it, right? So we were able to give that with a very high degree of certainty using that, and it's actually being used in production today, and very useful. So, but until then, this data was just totally unstructured. And same thing with you could use that for customer sentiment analysis too. All these things that customers type in on forums, discussions they have with their CSRs. You could tap into that tool to basically see how your customers are responding, what are their greatest needs, what are their greatest complaints, and basically improve the customer interaction. With video and camera, mostly this thing is vegetation management. There's a lot of organizations which I have seen actually using drones to capture where the vegetations are growing over the electrical lines. But we're just looking at it manually and seeing if there's any vegetation. You could use machine learning to actually analyze that as well as if there's a dangerous situation like smoke coming out of the place. You could have a camera automatically detect smoke coming out of the place. So you can create analytics around that. These are some of the examples that we practically implement.
There are frameworks for making sure the organization is ready for AI, and I know they look at things like technology, boundaries, and goals, and etc. But it boils down to one thing. It's actually, you need to know your business, and you need to know what your engagements internally and externally are like. I think once you have a handle on that, you can then prioritize them and implement them in a way that actually makes some value for your organization.
Thank you. I think this is a great segue to our next question to Trinity. How is data collected, used, and used in the implementation and management of AI, and how can utilities ensure the best quality and use of data?
Well, I think what the other panelists have already talked about really articulates a strategy around how data could and should be collected in terms of what your competencies are inside an organization, your partnerships, et cetera. But we're also talking about data collection and challenges in the midst of industry that's rapidly changing and huge transition around climate, around sustainability, and this means that our data strategies have to also change while we're in the midst of implementing them and understanding them. And data has to come from all different places. It can't just be within our own four walls. We need to understand context. We need to understand the world around us. It needs to be flowing not just from inside our organization and out, but the other way around. So where is the data coming from? What is the North Star? How many layers of North Stars do you need to solve a problem? And how much data exists? Where are there data gaps? And where could you potentially get that data? And how does it need to improve over time? So these are all really big data challenges. And I think as the panel's already talked about, what your competencies are internally is a really critical component. What your policies have historically been versus what they might need to be in terms of how you collaborate. I mean, radical collaboration is critical to solving sustainability and creating new solutions. to being prepared for electrification. And that means we have to be able to go outside of our own four walls and create new policies. So not being afraid to identify where an organization might have competencies, go outside of what's already in your organization, and bring in experts and be willing to kind of think outside of how you've traditionally done it. I think one huge example of that is it's not just about putting information out to our customers, it's also about getting information back from our customers, and how that relationship has to change around data.
Great, thank you. Cengizhan, could you tell us about employee engagement? So one of the biggest uses and challenges of AI is customer engagement, but internally, how important is employee engagement, and how can utilities achieve employee engagement with AI and bridge the skills gap in this space?
Okay, so actually when we had our pre-conference call, I had devised a way to answer this question, but I think this morning I had some enlightenment and decided to go with a different answer. So customer engagement and application of AI in customer engagement, I mean, there are tons of examples around us. Apps you use every day is leveraging AI and creating experiences for you that you like. We don't need to go into that. Everyone knows that all around. If you go to our industry, utility industry, and unfortunately, customer experience or customer engagement in our industry, at least historically, has been terrible, because the way utilities tend to define customer engagement is to send a bill once a month. And that's how we engage with our customers in the past. Obviously, that is now changing in many ways. And utilities are trying to implement AI to do better with that. Some of them are doing better. Some of them are doing not so much. And I'm sure they like to track that using NPS scores and things like that. It's a very utility thing to do. But I think really the success when it comes to customer engagement is defined by one question, and it's related to design. Are the products or the engagement experiences that you create for your products as a utility, are they creating delightful experiences for your customers? It's a yes or no question, very simple. But coming up with an answer that is yes to that question is very challenging and is an art in itself. What my experience has been in our organization is if you can find a way to make a connection between your employees and your customers, then it becomes more likely that you can answer this question with a yes. What I mean by that is your employees need to understand what is their purpose in the organization and how do they contribute to your engagement with your customer. If I ask this room, probably a lot of people will say, if I ask what do our customers want from us, a lot of people will say electricity in an affordable and reliable way, which is true, but at the same time it's false. It's not what they want, it's what they need. What they want from us, if you're an individual like you and me, I mean, it's light, it's climate control. If you're talking about a business, grocery stores, we were talking about it. It's how much more profitable can I be? How do I sell more lettuce by using better lighting or better climate inside the facility? So they need electricity to create these outcomes for their business or for their personal needs. If an employee understands that and can make that connection and can define their purpose in the organization on how they contribute to this, something that is magical happens, and it's called motivation, because they understand why they are there for. So I've been speaking for 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and I haven't actually answered your question yet. Because I was originally going to go with buzzwords and say agile transformation methods, change management, training on scripting languages, whatever. That's all true. I mean, you obviously need those things, but all of those things need to relate to motivation of the employees to create outcomes that actually matter for the customer. So I think this is a better answer. I hope people like it a lot more, but I think that's what I feel, because we only succeeded when actually we had employees that were motivated to do what we want to do.
Now No, that is great. Thank you.
I just want to add something to this. This is it's amazing, right? About the customer engagement thing. So something happened to me 2 days ago. I called up this Chinese restaurant to order food. This actually happened. I just called them up and I said, I want to order a pickup. And the minute I told my phone number, he said, you want the combination fried rice? I said, yes. I'm becoming predictable, but the point is that I was going to order that, and he said, you want the combination fried rice? I said, yes. Okay, this is the bill, and I kept the line. So it was just like a 30-second call. But I got what I wanted. He got off the phone quicker, and this actually happened. And this is something that we were trying to do at another utility where, when the customer calls to the customer service center, we basically want to figure out why are they calling for? Is it because they have a high bill? Is it because, or we went there to fix a problem or something like that, right? We are using the machine learning or AI basically to find out why the customer is calling, being more engaging, and it serves two purposes. The customer is happy, he's getting off your call, getting his job done quicker, and your CSRs are free to go and attend to another call because you have limited number of hours. Everyone has waited online for somebody to pick up the phone and talk to us, right? So I think it's a great point. I just wanted to add that funny story that happened to me.
And now I want fried rice.
Thank you for sharing that. Cengiz, I want to go back to you. Back to your answer. You said that you had more success when employees knew the purpose and like bridging the gap between employees and customers. Would you like to share with us an example? I know you shared it with me, and it was a very interesting story. I don't want to leave this discussion without hearing it here today.
I need to pick because there's so many examples, but maybe a not so profound experience that I have, and I have Willie actually, who used to be in my team in the audience. I just saw him because he was part of that team as well. When I was working for our retail supply organization, we decided to make a few changes because we were getting bottlenecked with the amount of deals that we could process in a given time, and that the size of that team was continuing to grow to a level that was unsustainable from a cost perspective. So a lot of the work that team used to do was gather consumption data from the utility, look at it and detect if there were any anomalies with it, clean that up, create a forecast, create a cost to serve, and make an offer to the customer for their electricity supply. That was basically data entry, very little data manipulation. It wasn't an interesting job. I think Willie would probably concur with me. And people who are actually working on this were not really feeling the contribution that they were making to the business. So when I came in, and some of the things that we did was actually leverage AI, actually through a startup, leveraging Google Cloud. So a lot of connections here. Yes. But they were basically, we tried to automate to the extent we can all of those mundane tasks for the employees and have them actually focus. Here is the customer, here is what their building looks like, here's what they want to do. If they're a hotel, well, they want to have more people stay in their hotel. So we need to understand their consumption patterns in a better way. And while we're offering a cost to serve for electricity, we should actually also propose, if you can shift your consumption in certain ways, you're probably going to be, your cost is going to go down, yep, or you're going to create more delightful experiences for your customers. So once employees, I think, started to get that, I think they felt more motivated to contribute, and they felt more motivated to going from that data entry job to a data analysis job, which requires different skill sets. And instead of us trying to offer training to them, they were willing to go out and engage in training to improve their skill sets so that they can contribute more. I lost a lot of people in that team, by the way.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Trinity, I want to ask you, how can AI be used for renewable energy production, acquisition, and integration, and to promote sustainability while maintaining resiliency and reliability?
Well, we don't have all day for all of the potential answers to that, but one thing that I want to just kind of piggyback on what the panel's already articulated, particularly around delighting customers. the customers and their priorities around energy have changed fairly significantly in the last 18 to 24 months with the amount of organizations making renewable energy and net zero commitments. We have a sort of a horizontal problem / challenge / opportunity to delight our customers. So all of these organizations, corporates, cities, municipalities that are setting these goals and making commitments around them have to accomplish certain things. And that's an opportunity to really engage with our customers in a way that maybe we haven't historically had before. Because they have a problem, we have a problem, and so together we can create a solution, and that data can flow back and forth. But it's critical to make them part of the solution. And conversely, if we don't make them part of the solution, they'll find a solution, right? So we need to have a different relationship with customers around sustainability and energy transition in general. The other piece that I think is slightly more specific. You mentioned production and transmission and a variety of different things. We don't talk a lot about efficiencies, and when we think about how do we reach some of these goals, it really that information, transparency to our customers on when they could run certain things and why they should be making some of those decisions. That transparency back to our customers helps us solve some of these problems. So again, going back to understanding our data and what we know and how we can make it more transparent and available to our customers so that we can both delight them and solve some of these challenges. And AI has a huge opportunity to do that at scale. Google also has a lot of geospatial competencies. A lot of people don't know that. We know we have maps, but we have geospatial aggregation of public data with algorithms built on top of it. And there's a really unique opportunity when it comes to AI and in the intersection of structured and unstructured data and geospatial specifically to solve big problems, to bring in contextual insight. Energy efficiency, as just one example, would be leveraging satellite and remote sensing infrared cameras to look at an entire city or even an entire state or region and identify building inefficiencies, right? Energy audits that have historically taken a lot of time could be done by just bringing in new and interesting data sets. And it's also about how do we weave that into other decision criteria, other plans and strategies, additional AI and machine learning for optimizing or predicting wind, right? Historically, the adage is you can't predict the weather. Well, we kind of have to. And not only do we need to predict the weather, but we need to predict how it's going to change, how extreme weather is going to make impacts, how population and climate-related migration are going to change our city makeups, how electrification and energy demand and load is going to be impacted. Prediction is critical, and context is critical. These are big data problems. And being able to pull in data from multiple places, identifying what piece of the puzzle we're trying to solve, and then layer it in to more pieces of the puzzle. And then we can actually conquer, with little 10% increments, big 10x problems.
That's great. Thank you so much. It seems like we have a lot of uses for AI in this space, but I want to turn it back to you, Yuvaraj. So Zpryme is partnering with, or has partnered with Orchid to publish a white paper that is due to be published soon. So the literature and our survey in collaboration with Orchid shows that utilities have concerns regarding data accuracy and privacy. It's one of the biggest concerns that we've seen in our survey results. So what would you say are the biggest challenges and misconceptions about AI utilities from your perspective?
Right, sorry. Yeah, so there are a few things that, before you take up an AI project, right? So a few things that we have to keep in mind. Something that Evan was also talking about, right? So it's basically, to understand your problem and know what the solution is. Sometimes AI projects are implemented expecting, some unrealistic, output out of it. We should clearly understand what data is needed for it and what is the output we are going to expect, right? If we are not clear on that, then it's going to be, it's going to fail right there. The second thing is after you've identified your use case, this is what I want to do. The second thing you have to do is see if you have the data to actually feed into that system. That is some level of it, internally you could do it. Some level of it, maybe you need some data scientists to look at the data and just tell you whether you are going to get this output or not, right? And once you are prepared for that, the third is how good is your data? Most of us have used applications and forms that come up, and sometimes we just want to go to the next page. We just fill whatever we want and say submit. That happens in utilities too. There's a lot of documents that they have to fill in. Sometimes they just don't have the information. They'll just type in blank or 9999 and press enter, right? And that is bad data. If you use that for machine learning, your output is going to be not as great as what you want it to be. So getting clean data is very important, but all is not lost there. I mean, there are easier ways to filter this data out, or and get only the good data that you want. So you could actually do that. And like the other example I was talking about, knowing whether a call is important or not, the work orders, whether I should have done a truck roll or not. They didn't have that information. We extracted it from unstructured data that was stored. It's in a different format, but we were able to extract it back. So one way or another, we need to see if the data is there. And the other thing is, machine learning requires a lot of data. If you just have thousands of rows of data, that's not going to help. You have to think about hundreds of thousands or even millions of rows of data, and which I think most of the organizations today have. So that's not a problem there. And because of the huge amount of data, even if you have misleading data in the middle, I think it will just get ignored by the machine learning system, which is just trying to figure out the pattern. So as long as you have enough data, you should be able to implement that. So these are some of the things that organizations have to keep in mind before getting into AI, or else they're going to face troubles once they start it. Usually it's get resolved on the way, but it's better to be prepared to before we do that. So that's.
I think you also asked about privacy and cybersecurity, and I'm not going to argue. Obviously, they are all important things, but I think as an industry, we need to be very careful in saying that or using these words to actually create very high barriers of entry for innovators to come into this space and start innovating. No doubt, they're important, but I think there are great examples in front of us when you look at other industries. Take the financial industry, for instance, where they were able to bring in innovators and were able to share data with these innovators so they could create certain products or applications that actually mattered for the consumer. I'm pretty sure cybersecurity and privacy are important for the financial industry as well. But they were able to create, for example, an ATM card. So doesn't matter which bank you're working with, you take your ATM card, you go anywhere in the world, you stick it in a machine, it works. There's a lot of data transfer that's happening in the background, and they were able to figure it out. When it comes to the energy industry, even if I'm dealing in one state, dealing with two different utilities, being able to gather customer data is so difficult, is so non-standardized, and sometimes the amount of security attestations that we have to abide by is ridiculous. Even the utility even doesn't have that much security. And I think that's prohibiting, to a sense, innovation. And I think we need to be very careful about that. Just wanted to say that.
We have to build machine learning to accommodate the data policy that's in place to get around some of those challenges. And that's just more stuff we have to build in a short window. So if we kind of rethink some of those policies, and going back to your earlier point about delighting the customer, we can focus on what really needs to happen and transpire versus creating solutions to get around policy.
I think one of the drivers too is goes back to that data governance, right? Especially recognizing when you need to integrate multiple data sources.
Yeah.
I think lack of understanding of your data creates fear that then gets in the way of security and privacy, because there isn't an understanding of what you're giving somebody else access to, or the implications or not that may have from a business or operational perspective. It's interesting for CPS Energy. I mean, we're a municipally owned utility, and our owner is the city of San Antonio, and we have a sister utility that is San Antonio Water System, and we're all one community, and very rarely do we share data, and if so, there's a manual process by which we exchange that information, right? So those challenges are real, and they're even real in an organization like ours, where we have a common owner and common customers and common residents, and we still are challenged in creating a single view of the entities or individuals that we're collectively trying to serve.
Evan, I want to ask you, how can utilities integrate digital investment strategy, specifically AI investments in this case, into their business plans?
So, I think there are a couple of different approaches. I think there's a way to do it incrementally over time, right? We talked a little bit about this at the beginning, finding those use cases, opportunities where you can derive value back to the organization, where you can quantify the benefit of the investment, or often even in IT organizations, maybe redirecting funds from project A to project B so you can invest in those use cases that then are really a springboard for getting that broader enterprise alignment. I think that's one approach. The other is depending on other drivers in the organization. So us at CPS Energy, we almost have a perfect storm at the moment of investments that we have to make. We have a 22-year-old ERP platform that we have not invested in over time to optimize as our business has evolved and changed. We have significant challenges with our data, right? When we look at governance and different data sources are leveraged by different parts of our business, and they result in different different perspectives around decisions that we're making across our operating model. And so our approach has been, hey, we know we have to invest significantly in all of these different things to solve a problem, but how can we do it in a way that integrates AI as a key point of challenging our operating model, right? We don't just want to rip out the technologies that we've used historically and put new ones in and nothing else changes. Our foundation and our strategy is underpinned by challenging the historical ways of working, right? How can we rethink the way our business operates, and how can we enable that new operating model through a technology platform that we know we have to replace anyways, right? So I think you really just have to look at the drivers across the organization and see, where the opportunities lie, whether it's the incremental approach, whether it's the broader strategy that maybe you already have, access to funds, or a hybrid of the two.
Maybe just to add, whenever we're trying to make an investment on an AI application or a system, unfortunately, at least people in our similar fields, they tend to focus too much on the cost. I mean, obviously it's important, but I actually went to a training, and they didn't really go through any of the specific things that we're supposed to do. They just gave us a task. As a data officer, for example, you're basically trying to convince your board to invest in a data governance platform. And here's how much it costs. Go do your presentation. And what we found out that was successful was only if we were able to explain to the executives the benefit of investing in such a platform, not just the cost. And an example that we have at Engie is a platform that we call Smart Institutions. So we deploy it in customer sites for our very large customers like universities and so on. And I'm not going to get into what it does, but you present it in a way that you convince the executive that your investment is going to turn into an asset for the organization. And we developed, for example, this platform, which in its first iteration was just supposed to track carbon emissions and consumption reduction and things like that. But over time, it evolved into a very powerful platform. So when we were going to our next university to make a pitch, what we tried, it was a public university. We just grabbed all of their data, which was publicly available, stick it into the platform, and we did a demo. Here's what your campus looked like in the past year. Here's how it could look like 10 years from now. Here are the projects that we think makes the most sense in terms of decarbonization and energy efficiency and so on and so forth. And here's how we can do it. Here's your CapEx program. When we started to do that, it actually started to bring more business from different universities, and we actually have universities reach out to us and say, hey, we want this in our campus as well. So an investment, a cost, actually turned out to be an asset for the organization. And I think in terms of the strategy to deploy AI and other digital technologies, that focus is, I think, very important.
And there is so much opportunity right now. There's so much top-line opportunity, and I think we may not have all of the financial models in our organization to understand the full extent of that financial opportunity that exists because of energy transition and sustainability and the customers and their priority focus and shift right now. But there is such a huge opportunity out there. And so as you're determining where to make your investment, make sure that you are thinking about the changing landscape. And if you are capturing these new market opportunities that are emerging, if you're building that into your strategy, if you're building it into your financial model. Because if you aren't, somebody else probably is.
Yeah, I also want to add that I like the word, it's an asset for the organization, right? And one thing you have to remember about AI projects is that it's not a fixed asset. It's not like it's giving an output right now and that's the the good output that you're going to have. It's going to improve over time because you're going to keep collecting more data and you're going to keep feeding to it, and it's going to learn and it's going to improve itself. So the output is just going to improve as time goes on. So you're going to get not just the same output, but it's going to basically just improve. So it's a appreciating investment.
Jenkins, I have my last question for you. You mentioned earlier in implementing AI for employee and customer engagement, a collaboration you had with a startup. Could you tell us more about partnerships and collaborations you found to be vital for a vibrant ecosystem in the emerging technologies in the utility space?
I like the word that you used, ecosystem. It's a vast ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it's impossible for a head of innovation in a company to be able to just track that ecosystem, or even an innovation group. So I think we can all agree that it needs to be the entire organization contributing to this ecosystem or tracking this ecosystem so that it can contribute to the company. So how do you achieve that? What we did at Engie, at least that's what I can explain, is we basically looked at these 4 different axes. The first one is the venture fund path, which a lot of utilities will also do. That's the immediate response. You just either create your own venture fund or invest in a venture fund that will go and find startups, which is fine, which is important and good. But they're usually laser focused on startups that make financial sense, right? It's not necessarily strategic to your own organization. So that's just one axis. The second one is universities, because universities are at the forefront of research and innovation. So you need to be able to partner with more than one university to actually see what they're looking at, what the next 20 years is going to bring. The third one is corporates, so competition. So as Engie, I want to know what EDF is using in terms of different solutions. I want to know what NRG is using for their solutions, because well, what they invest in is important, but also what their experience with those solutions is also as important. So that if there's something that makes sense for us, we can also engage in that front. And it's both ways. And the fourth one is incubators, obviously. They tend to help startups, and they have a good connection and connection framework with the startups, so it's important to engage with all of these. What we found is, obviously, that's a lot, and I mean, the bigger your geographic landscape, the more difficult it becomes to track all this. So even if you have 200 employees tracking all of this, now it becomes very difficult to share all that information. So I think at some point you need a digital solution as well. So what we did was actually use our CRM system to not only just engage with our customers, but also at the same time engage with startups and gather all the information we have from startups. Once you have that, then the next steps are pretty obvious. I mean, you can choose to prioritize which startups makes the most sense. You can choose to just buy their solution. You can partner and co-develop the solution, which is what we did with that startup. You can make a financial investment, or you can just go ahead and acquire. And I think if you have that kind of structure in your DNA, then I think you will end up making the right decision.
Well, thank you very much. If anyone has any follow-up to what Cengizhan has said, I think that concludes our discussion here, but we have about 5 minutes left. We are opening it for questions, so to the audience here. So if you have any question, please, I would invite you to stand up and ask your question to our speakers.
So I'll go first. Ask the question. I sent it on the.
Yeah, I apologize.
No
The
worries.
Slido is not working also in this room, so.
Of course, it's not technology.
It's the room at least
Yeah.
this time.
So critical question around AI, right? So we know that AI can streamline at its very core. It removes touch points and basically added steps at its very core. What can we do as an enterprise to remove the creative destruction that AI causes? One of the things you mentioned was that some of those employees that you had, they weren't very happy at the end of the day. And the truth of the matter is that's kind of part and parcel to implementing AI enterprise scale.
Yeah, well, what I will say, I agree with your statement, and I think we've been talking a lot about chatbots, for example, in the past 2 days. And while chatbots might be at the forefront of AI applications in terms of engaging with the customer, it goes back to knowing your business and knowing your clients. You will figure out, if you know your business well, that some of your customers do not actually want to talk to a bot. They actually do value a phone call a lot more than a chatbot. So I think it's a balance that you have to achieve. If you just go 100% AI on everything, like you said, you're going to miss some of those important touch points, and that will ultimately have a negative impact on your business. So I think it's important that you need to know your business well to avoid such things. And when it comes to employee engagement, I think that, again, that personal connection, that connection between employees is also very important. One thing that has nothing to do with AI that we implemented actually was what I like to call the John the Baptist program. It basically, an employee literally just travels from employee to employee or travels from office to office and tries to share what their experience have been with a certain application that we have, and it basically tries to increase the adaptation of such programs. So I think AI gets you, to answer your question in a short way, to a point, but if you want to go the full way, you have to maintain those personal connections and touches.
Yeah, I think to creating opportunities, right, for employees that may be impacted along the way, because not everybody's going to want to transition to what their role looks like using a new type of technology or a different solution, but there may be other needs across the organization, right? You know, one of the things that came to mind as you asked the question is contemplating a change like this and the impact to people isn't something new to utilities. Technology is different, but look at AMI, right? Hundreds of people in organizations that were meter readers had to transition, right? And while some along the way may have opted out of what those options were, I think the one thing an organization can do is make sure that those options exist and that there's clarity for individuals and a plan, right, to give them the requisite knowledge, skills, and abilities. If they choose to opt in, that there's a path and a place for them. Won't always be the case, but that's critical, and I think we talked a little bit about it, the panel did in the discussion today, is that's foundational to being successful, right, is you know you're gonna need new skills, and the people that can deliver the value the fastest once you give them those skills are the ones that already know your business, right?
Thank you so much. We have about a minute left, so if anyone else in the audience has another question, we can answer that quickly.
I was just going to articulate also the thing that's inherent about creativity is it's highly adaptable. So you can repurpose those assets, whatever they may be, as long as you give them a mechanism or a place for it. And I think that's really kind of what you were alluding to, Evan.
Thank you, Trinity. That's an awesome end to our discussion. I appreciate you, our wonderful speakers, for joining me today. And thank you all for attending this breakout session. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day at the BTS Institute.